Why does no one really want to live in Ohio? It's shocking, but did you know that Ohio has been nicknamed the heart of it all because of its central location in the United States? It sounds appealing, like a place everyone would want to be. But here's the twist. If Ohio is truly the heart, why do so many Americans avoid making it their permanent home? Every year when national moving statistics are released, Ohio consistently ranks among the states that people leave more often than they move to. This is no coincidence. There are clear and concrete reasons why people hesitate to consider Ohio their home. Now, before anyone gets defensive, let's be clear that Ohio has a lot to offer. It has great cities, universities, sports teams, and a location that makes it easy to travel to other states. But the question isn't whether Ohio has good qualities, but why, despite them, the state has a reputation as one of the least desirable places to settle down long term. When you start to investigate, a fascinating picture emerges. Climate issues, job opportunities, infrastructure, and even cultural perception all play a role in this trend. To understand why people hesitate to live in Ohio, we'll review 15 reasons, each more striking than the last, backed up by reality and explained in enough detail to see the full picture. Reason 1. The weather is unpredictable, extreme, and often miserable. If there's one thing that instantly turns many people away from Ohio, it's the weather. And no, this isn't just the usual "it's cold in the winter" complaint. Ohio's climate is notoriously erratic and frustrating. The state sits in the Great Lakes region, which means it gets the double punch of humid summers and frigid winters. In the summer, Ohio often faces sticky humidity that makes even an 85-degree day feel like a swamp. Residents will tell you that you don't just sweat, you feel like you're wrapped in a wet blanket. Then, just a few months later, those same areas plunge into freezing cold with icy roads and heavy snowfall in northern regions. For example, Cleveland and the Snowbelt counties regularly see more than 100 inches of snow per year, largely thanks to lake effect snow from Lake Erie. The kicker is how quickly the weather changes. It's not uncommon for Ohio to experience a 40-degree temperature swing in a single week. One day you're in a t-shirt, the next you're scraping ice off your car. This unpredictability makes planning outdoor activities difficult and contributes to a gloomy reputation. In fact, cities like Cleveland and Akron rank among the cloudiest in the nation, with some areas seeing more than 200 days of overcast skies annually. For people who crave sunshine and consistency, Ohio can feel depressing. Seasonal affective disorder, SADI, is more common in northern states, and Ohio's long, gray winters amplify that struggle. The harsh truth is, if you want reliable sunshine or mild winters, Ohio is rarely the place you'll choose. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and uncover the hidden stories and curiosities of each U.S. state that no one else will tell you. Reason 2. Economic stagnation and job market challenges. Ohio's economy has strengths, but it also struggles with perception and reality when it comes to job opportunities. Many Americans still associate Ohio with declining manufacturing, the shuttering of factories, and shrinking small towns. While the economy has diversified into healthcare, education, and technology, the job market isn't as attractive compared to booming states like Texas, Florida, or North Carolina. Data repeatedly shows that younger workers are leaving Ohio for greener pastures. College graduates often head to bigger cities elsewhere because salaries and career growth opportunities are more competitive outside the state. For instance, the median household income in Ohio lags behind the national average. And while cost of living is relatively low, people often feel the trade-off isn't worth it if they're sacrificing professional advancement. Another layer is population loss. Census figures highlight that Ohio has experienced outmigration in recent decades, particularly among younger demographics. This creates a feedback loop. Fewer young professionals lead to less vibrancy in certain communities, which in turn discourages others from staying. Even though major cities like Columbus and Cincinnati are modernizing, many towns still look and feel economically stagnant. Abandoned buildings, empty storefronts, and declining infrastructure in smaller communities leave an impression of decline. People want to feel like their home state is growing and thriving, and too often, Ohio gives off the opposite vibe. Reason 3. Ohio's reputation as flyover country hurts its image. Let's talk perception. Whether fair or unfair, image matters when people decide where to live. Ohio is often lumped into what people casually call flyover country, the stretch of states in the Midwest that many coastal Americans skip over when traveling from one major city to another. This label has real consequences. Ask someone in Los Angeles or New York about Ohio, and you'll often hear responses like boring or there's nothing to do there. While residents know that isn't the full truth, Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati do have cultural scenes. The national stereotype remains stubbornly negative. Media doesn't help much. Ohio often gets portrayed as the land of cornfields, rusting factories, and endless highways. Popular culture rarely highlights its more dynamic aspects. Compare that with states like Colorado, which get constant positive press for outdoor adventures, or Florida, which markets itself as sunny and exciting. Ohio doesn't have a similar draw, and the branding problem sticks. For Americans deciding where to relocate, perception is powerful. Even if job opportunities exist or the cost of living is attractive, the thought of moving somewhere labeled dull or forgotten can turn people away. It's not that Ohio truly has nothing to offer, it's that the national image problem creates an invisible barrier. Reason 4. Urban versus rural divide and community challenges. Ohio has a strong divide between its major urban centers and its rural areas, and this creates challenges for residents and newcomers alike. Cities like Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland provide the bulk of job opportunities, cultural events, and modern amenities, but large portions of Ohio remain deeply rural, with smaller towns and counties facing population decline, limited healthcare options, and underfunded schools. This split can make the state feel inconsistent. Move to a big city and you'll find lively nightlife, sports teams, restaurants, and universities. Drive just an hour in nearly any direction and you may encounter communities struggling with poverty, opioid addiction, and lack of opportunities. For families, this divide presents difficult choices. Living in rural areas may be more affordable, but access to healthcare and strong schools can be limited. On the other hand, big cities offer more amenities, but also higher crime rates, traffic congestion, and housing competition. The urban-rural gap also fuels political tension. Ohio used to be considered a swing state, but in recent years, sharp divides between urban liberal hubs and rural conservative areas have made statewide politics contentious. For newcomers who just want a stable, welcoming place to settle down, the atmosphere can feel polarized and uneasy. Ultimately, Ohio doesn't offer the same unified, consistent experience across the state that other places do, and that inconsistency makes it less appealing as a long-term home for many. Reason 5. Higher than average health problems and public health struggles. One of the less glamorous but very real reasons people avoid living in Ohio is public health. The state consistently ranks poorly on national health reports. For example, Ohio ranks below the national average in areas like obesity rates, smoking rates, and opioid-related deaths. These statistics don't just exist on paper. They affect daily life, community resources, and overall quality of life. The opioid epidemic has hit Ohio particularly hard. Entire towns have been impacted by addiction crises, stretching local resources thin and creating a sense of decline in affected regions. For families considering a move, knowing that certain counties struggle heavily with substance abuse can be discouraging. Additionally, Ohioans experience higher than average rates of chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes. Healthcare systems in the cities are strong. Cleveland is home to the world-renowned Cleveland Clinic, but in rural areas, access to quality healthcare can be limited. Hospitals have closed in some counties, leaving residents to drive long distances for basic or emergency care. When combined, these factors give Ohio a reputation for being a less healthy place to live compared to other states. Americans prioritizing wellness, outdoor activity, and strong healthcare access might look elsewhere, perhaps towards states that promote healthier lifestyles and offer better infrastructure for fitness and preventive care. So far, we've seen how weather, economy, image, community divides, and health struggles combine to push Americans away from Ohio. These aren't small inconveniences, they're fundamental issues that impact daily life, perception, and the ability to thrive. But we're only just scratching the surface. There are 10 more reasons that dig even deeper into why Ohio struggles to hold on to residents. The next section will cover everything from infrastructure and transportation problems to cultural stagnation, crime perception, and even environmental issues that people rarely talk about. Ohio may call itself the heart of it all, but the reality is more complicated. For millions of Americans, the combination of harsh weather, stagnant job growth, an image problem, uneven communities, and health struggles make the state far less appealing than its nickname suggests. Still, we've only unpacked the first 5 reasons. 6. The roads that seem endless and rough. Ohio is often described as the crossroads of America, sitting in the middle of routes that connect the Northeast with the Midwest and the South. That sounds convenient on paper until you actually drive through it. The state has nearly 123,000 miles of public roads, which puts it near the top in the nation, but the condition of many of those roads is far from ideal. Constant freeze-thaw cycles in winter create cracks, potholes, and uneven surfaces that seem to reappear every year, no matter how often they are patched. For anyone who has driven long stretches of Interstate 70 or Interstate 71, the pattern feels familiar. A smooth section followed by sudden jolts, lane closures, and orange barrels that never seem to disappear. Ohio has one of the highest numbers of construction zones per mile because of ongoing maintenance, which turns even simple commutes into drawn-out experiences. A trip that should take 3 hours can suddenly become 5, depending on accidents or road work. This situation doesn't just frustrate drivers, it also impacts the state economy. Truckers who rely on Ohio's highways for freight transport lose valuable time and money. For everyday residents, owning a car means higher repair costs. Bent rims, misaligned suspensions, or even blown tires are common consequences of Ohio's road conditions. Some insurance companies even note higher than average claims related to road damage in Ohio compared to neighboring states. So while Ohio's location might make it a convenient hub, the constant wear and tear of its roads make living there a daily struggle on wheels. It's no wonder people groan when they hear Ohio traffic. 7. Allergies and air quality that drive people crazy. Every spring and fall, Ohio's residents brace themselves for something few outsiders truly understand. Allergy season that feels like it never ends. The state's combination of long growing seasons, a humid climate, and widespread agriculture means pollen levels often rank among the highest in the nation. Cities like Columbus and Dayton frequently appear on lists of the worst U.S. cities for seasonal allergies. Tree pollen in spring, grass pollen in early summer, and ragweed in late summer to fall create a triple wave of suffering. Add in mold spores that thrive in damp basements or after heavy rains, and you've got an almost year-round cycle of sneezing, watery eyes, and sinus headaches. Pharmacies do brisk business in antihistamines, but for many people, it barely takes the edge off. On top of pollen, Ohio struggles with air quality issues. Industrial activity and heavy vehicle traffic contribute to smog, especially in larger metropolitan areas like Cleveland and Cincinnati. The American Lung Association has repeatedly given some Ohio counties failing grades for ozone pollution. Poor air quality worsens asthma and other respiratory issues, making the state especially difficult for those with sensitive lungs. When you add it all up, living in Ohio often feels like living in an allergy lab experiment. People moving in from out of state are frequently shocked by how quickly their symptoms flare up. For many, the endless sneezing and breathing troubles are enough reason to pack up and look for clearer air elsewhere. 8. Taxes that seem to pile on from every direction. Here's something that catches many newcomers off guard. Ohio doesn't have a single tax burden, it has layers of them. Unlike some states that stick to property and sales taxes, Ohio has its own complex system that often leaves residents feeling nickel and dimed. First, there's the state income tax, which is structured on a progressive scale. While the rates themselves may not be the very highest in the nation, they still add up. On top of that, Ohio's municipal income taxes set it apart. More than 600 cities and villages in the state levy their own income tax, usually ranging between 1% and 3%. That means someone working in one city but living in another could be subject to multiple filings and withholdings every year. Property taxes are another sore point. Ohio's effective property tax rate consistently ranks above the national average, particularly in suburban counties around Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. Then there's sales tax, which starts at 5.75% at the state level, but often climbs above 7% once local add-ons are included. Add in various fees, from vehicle registrations to sin taxes on alcohol and tobacco, and the impression builds that Ohio always has another way to collect money from your wallet. For retirees or young families comparing states, Ohio rarely makes the low tax haven list. When they realize their paycheck or pension will be cut by multiple layers of taxation, many simply choose to live elsewhere. 9. Education struggles that push families away. Education is often a deciding factor when families choose where to live, and Ohio's system has had long-standing issues that make it less appealing. The state operates under a patchwork of public school districts, over 600 in total, and the quality varies dramatically. Some districts, often in wealthier suburbs, perform above the national average, while others in rural or inner-city areas consistently struggle. Funding is a major issue. Ohio relies heavily on property taxes to fund schools, which creates a wide gap between affluent and less affluent communities. Students in poor districts may face outdated textbooks, limited extracurricular options, and crowded classrooms, while just a few miles away, wealthier districts enjoy advanced facilities and specialized programs. Standardized testing has also been a sore spot. Ohio has leaned heavily on tests to measure performance, leading to stress for students and teachers alike. Many parents argue this approach narrows education, focusing on test prep rather than real learning. Additionally, teacher shortages have become more pronounced, especially in math, science, and special education, leaving some schools scrambling to fill classrooms with qualified instructors. For families who want a consistent, high-quality education system, Ohio feels like a gamble. Your child's future can depend heavily on your zip code. This uncertainty pushes many parents to consider other states where education funding is more balanced and reliable. Before continuing, remember to subscribe to the channel and stay up to date with what no one else is saying about the situation in the U.S. states. 10 crime rates in certain areas create fear. While Ohio isn't universally dangerous, certain areas have gained reputations that make potential residents think twice. Cities like Cleveland, Dayton, and Cincinnati have violent crime rates above the national average, especially in specific neighborhoods. Property crimes such as car break-ins and theft also remains a persistent issue in urban areas. Cleveland, for instance, frequently appears on lists of cities with high crime rates, with issues ranging from gang activity to opioid-related violence. Dayton, once a hub for manufacturing, has struggled with economic decline, and crime rates rose in tandem with poverty levels. While revitalization efforts are underway in many of these cities, the lingering perception of danger makes relocation to Ohio less attractive. Even outside the cities, the opioid epidemic has fueled increases in crime across smaller towns. Thefts related to drug addiction, such as stealing copper wire or breaking into homes for quick cash, have become more common in certain regions. For families weighing safety, the statistics are difficult to ignore. While crime is often localized to specific neighborhoods, outsiders may not want to take the risk. Instead, they look towards states with lower crime rates and less negative national attention. 11th education rankings that don't impress anyone. Education is often a deciding factor when families choose where to live. Unfortunately, Ohio's reputation in this area is a bit shaky. While it has some strong universities like Ohio State and Case Western Reserve, the K-12 system doesn't shine as brightly on a national level. Reports from education think tanks often place Ohio in the middle or lower end of the rankings compared to other states, especially in terms of funding equity and outcomes in struggling districts. For parents, this can be a major deal breaker. Imagine moving to a state where the quality of your child's school can drastically change just by crossing from one zip code to another. That level of unpredictability is stressful, and many families would rather relocate to a state with more consistent public school performance. States like Massachusetts, New Jersey, or Minnesota often outperform Ohio, which means parents weighing options will likely choose elsewhere. Add to this the steady rise in homeschooling within Ohio, not out of preference, but necessity in some regions, and you start to see the picture. Education is another reason people second guess calling Ohio home. When it comes to raising kids, Americans generally seek environments with the best possible resources, and Ohio doesn't always make the grade. 12. Taxes that feel like a squeeze. Many people assume Ohio is cheap to live in because of its low housing costs. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find that Ohio's tax situation can be surprising. While it doesn't have the highest income tax in the country, it does apply both state and local income taxes in many municipalities, which catches newcomers off guard. Living in Cleveland or Columbus, for example, can mean paying a local tax on top of state rates, leaving residents with a heavier than expected burden. Then there's property tax. Ohio's effective property tax rates consistently rank higher than the national average, especially in counties surrounding major metro areas. For retirees or anyone on a fixed income, this can be a frustrating reality. Even if your mortgage is low or paid off, the annual tax bill doesn't exactly let you relax. While Ohio isn't in the same tax-heavy league as states like New York or California, the combination of local income taxes, sales taxes, and above-average property taxes makes it less appealing than the low cost of living advertising suggests. And when Americans realize that cheap homes don't necessarily mean low overall expenses, some simply choose to stay away altogether. 13th, struggles with public transportation. If you're someone who thrives on efficient transportation, Ohio can be frustrating. Unlike states with robust networks, Ohio leans heavily on car dependency. Outside of limited bus systems in cities like Columbus or Cincinnati, there's little to no statewide rail or rapid transit infrastructure. For people used to the convenience of subways, commuter trains, or reliable buses, this feels like stepping back in time. Columbus, surprisingly, is the largest U.S. city without a public rail system of any kind. Instead, residents rely on driving, ride shares, or buses that often lack coverage and frequency. If you don't own a car, living in Ohio can feel isolating, especially in suburban and rural areas where even grocery shopping becomes a logistical challenge. Transportation experts often point out that this reliance on cars contributes to traffic problems, higher carbon emissions, and limited mobility for those who can't drive, like seniors or lower-income individuals. While states like Illinois, New York, and California have invested heavily in modern transit, Ohio has lagged behind, reinforcing the idea that it isn't keeping up with modern demands. For Americans who value connectivity and independence from car ownership, Ohio is far from an ideal destination. 14th, natural disaster risks that surprise people. Ohio isn't usually the first state that comes to mind when you think of natural disasters, but it has its own unique set of risks. Severe weather is a constant challenge, ranging from tornadoes sweeping across the flatlands to dangerous ice storms during the winter months. Flooding along rivers like the Ohio and the Scioto also creates serious damage, especially for towns and smaller communities. One of the more surprising issues is the increasing number of minor earthquakes in eastern Ohio, often linked to underground fracking activities. While they're rarely devastating, the psychological effect of unpredictable tremors adds to a growing sense of environmental instability.
So there you have it, the last 5 reasons Americans aren't flocking to Ohio. From education struggles and surprising taxes to transportation woes, unpredictable natural disasters, and a lack of cultural magnetism, the picture becomes clearer with every point. Ohio isn't unlivable, but it doesn't make a strong enough case to compete with states that offer a more defined identity, modern infrastructure, or consistent opportunities. What's fascinating is how the reasons build on each other. Ohio starts out attractive with affordability and location, but then reality sets in. Weather extremes, economic stagnation, taxes, education gaps, and cultural vagueness. Piece by piece, they add up to a conclusion many Americans reach before they ever consider packing their bags. Ohio is more of a pass-through state than a final destination. For travelers like me, Ohio remains an interesting place to visit, with its mix of quirks and contradictions. But as a place to settle long-term, the reasons against it clearly outweigh the reasons for it. And in a country with 50 diverse states to choose from, Americans are simply picking others that feel more promising, exciting, or comfortable. Now that you know all this, would you live in Ohio, or would you prefer another state? We'd love to read your opinion in the comments and see if we agree. But first, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on anything that almost no one dares to reveal about the states of the United States. Residents already dealing with harsh winters don't appreciate the added worry of shaking ground beneath their feet. Insurance costs tied to these risks can also pile up. Homeowners often need coverage for flooding or storm damage, and premiums in certain areas are higher than you'd expect. So while Ohio might not face the hurricanes of Florida or the wildfires of California, its mix of smaller yet persistent natural threats is enough to deter some Americans from settling down. It's one more factor in the long list of reasons the Buckeye State isn't winning relocation battles. 15th, cultural identity that feels vague. Finally, there's the question of identity. When you think of New York, images of skyscrapers and Broadway fill your head. California conjures beaches and Hollywood. Texas has cowboy culture and barbecue. But Ohio? Ask 10 people to describe it and you'll get 10 different answers. Some will say it's a sports state, others will emphasize farming, while others might just shrug and say, isn't that the place with cornfields? This lack of a strong, unified cultural identity makes it harder for Ohio to stand out in a competitive landscape of US states. Yes, it has passionate sports fans, a decent art scene in Columbus and Cleveland, and even a few quirky attractions like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but none of these seem to coalesce into a single magnetic pull that makes outsiders dream of moving there. For many Americans choosing where to live, cultural identity matters. People want to feel like they're part of something larger than themselves, a place with a clear brand they can buy into. Ohio's vague, middle-of-the-road image doesn't inspire that kind of passion. Instead, it leaves many people looking elsewhere for a state with a stronger sense of uniqueness.